Okay, over to you, Graham.
All right. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Kirsten. Is anyone able to see my screen? Can you see?
Absolutely.
Okay,
You're good.
making sure. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so as mentioned, my name is Graham Baggett. I am an IT manager for the US Census Bureau. I work in the decennial IT division, and so I work a lot with geography. I'm based in DC. Right now, DC is a little bit rainy, so not sure if things are where you're at, but just because our environment is a little bit dreary today doesn't mean that we have to be. So good afternoon, everyone. Perhaps good morning, depending on where you're calling in from. All right, so let's get started. So my title is Bare Metal DevOps: How to Bloom in the Brownfield. A glimpse of the description you can see about what does DevOps look like in an environment where you're pre-cloud, you're not fully containerized, you don't have those cool forward-thinking continuous ATOs. Is DevOps even possible in such an environment? I would argue yes. If you look at the 3 ways from Gene Kim for DevOps, it's SFC. It's an easy acronym for me to remember because SFC also stands for Suitland Federal Center, which is where Census headquarters is. But SFC stands for systems thinking. So sort of thinking holistically and trying to avoid localized optimization. How do you optimize the whole? You've got fast feedback. So how to try things out and then learn from them and get feedback from users, from the system, get systemic feedback. And then there's that culture of continuous innovation and continuous learning, those sort of, continuous everything, so to speak. And so you'll notice that in Gene's definition, there's no specific mention of cloud or Kubernetes or any of the cool stuff that people are able to use today. Those things are awesome, they're great. But what do you do in situations where you're not there? You need to continue advancing in your current environment. So let's advance the slide. So I start off with this spiral staircase because I feel like this is what DevOps is often presented to us. You've got this smooth, seamless, ever progressing iteration. That things are beautiful and they're great and they keep on getting better, right? And of course, in the IT world, especially in the federal government space, the reality is usually much more like this. Lots of hard work in relative anonymity. And so when you're in this type of environment, perhaps it's a heritage environment, perhaps it's a place where you've got a lot of regulation. How do you cultivate a DevOps culture in such an environment? And my answer to that really is by looking outside your team to help you innovate. That's not to neglect your own team. There's a lot of Kaizen that takes place there. You can get a lot of continuous improvement, but if you want to reach that kaikaku, that radical change, it's got to be looking outside your group to find out who has already solved these problems and how can they help you solve these problems. So if you take one thing away, I hope you take away that principle of looking outside your group, your area, maybe even your agency, to help generate and drive that innovation for you. So let me illustrate this point with my own DevOps story. So my journey in DevOps really began several years ago when working on a software application called Jaguar. Jaguar stands for Joint Application Geographic Updater and Reviewer. I know that's certainly a mouthful, so just like any good government system, we've got a nice acronym for it. Jaguar is a web-based application that allows end users internal to the Census Bureau to view geographic data, address data, and then depending on the person's level of privileges, they can make updates. And this is important to support things like the decennial census, because in the decennial census, we're really about 3 things. We're constitutionally mandated to count everyone, count them once, Well, we've also got to count them in the right place so that the numbers for each legal entity and statistical entity line up with reality as best as possible. And so an example of where someone might use this software, say there's a town or a municipality that is annexed some territory or de-annexed some territory. They can make those updates, send them to us, and then we can give them to our internal users, and then they can adjust the boundary of that particular incorporated place or what have you. And then we can make sure that will help, of course, get the counts to be more accurate for that particular jurisdiction. So that's a little background about what I work on. And so when we were starting to put this application together, we wanted to use an official Agile project management tool. We had come off of a previous project where we were using something different. We wanted to kind of, find out what was available at Census to use. And so we searched around for a long time. And we just couldn't find a tool that met our needs at a reasonable price point. We didn't want some large, fancy system. We just needed something very simple. The previous team we were on was an Agile Scrum team. So we were looking for a basic tool that allowed us to do time box intervals, 2-week sprints, and be able to manage user stories. And again, just never really found something that fit our needs well. At a price we could afford. And so, like any good bureaucracy hackers, that led us to kind of look around and see, hey, maybe we need to go beyond the boundaries that are established for us. Let's see what else is out there. Is there something else that can kind of, hit that sweet spot that we're looking for as we're trying to go through this whole innovation process and kind of begin embracing DevOps. And so really this innovation came from a contractor outside our team. This particular contractor wasn't associated with any particular tool, but he became aware of our search once we explained the issue to him. And he ended up suggesting a tool for us called GitLab. And this tool ended up, we said, we don't really know about it, but sure, we'll try it out. And this tool ended up providing us with that Agile project management that we're looking for. So we had the generic issue boards that we could create user stories from and create those sprints. And then as we adopted this tool, we also found that for us, it provided a lot of other benefits. So one benefit right off the top was having a Git-based code repository. The previous source code management tool that we were using was a file-based system with pessimistic locking. So really only one person's making changes at a time. This caused a lot of problems. Like, for example, if you wanted to do code review, how does that work in this type of system? There's a couple of ways you can go about it. You can have someone who's in charge of the code quality for that project, and they can lock all the files. And if you want to make a change, you essentially make it locally, and then you email that person and say, hey, here's my change. What do you think? And they can email back and say, oh, maybe try something different, or they can accept that and say, yep, and they'll essentially check in your change for you. Or you can kind of go the other route and just have everyone be able to lock files, make changes, and check them back in, and then hope that the person who's responsible for quality is able to go back and take a look at things retroactively after they've already been checked into the system. So code quality was a challenge for us. Now, with this Git-based system, of course, you can create branches off of your trunk, work on features, and then submit pull requests. GitLab calls them merge requests, they're the same thing. And then that gives a organic flow for doing code review. Now, each time you want to make sure that your code makes it into trunk, you'll have a technical lead, and that person can review the code, give that feedback, or allow it to be merged into trunk. And not only that, but then there was an opportunity for the team to further get feedback from each other and from the system through continuous integration pipelines. And so now, in addition to these manual code reviews, we can run a code quality job on that particular branch. And so we can get an automated check that's happening that's supplementing that manual code review to get multiple perspectives on the same code. We can run an automated build we can run an automated deployment, all in the development environment. And then we can shift left on security by starting to incorporate some of those good practices in terms of being able to run static application security testing. So we're going to look at that code that you wrote and see, okay, are we picking up any security vulnerabilities? Is there some sort of SQL injection concern, or cross-site scripting, whatever it may be? We can run dependency scanning. So we can take a look and say, okay, given that the majority of this application is third-party libraries, are we coming up with any kind of concerning vulnerabilities from that standpoint that we need to address? And we can run dynamic application security testing. So we can deploy that web application and then check it and see, okay, the application itself, not just the code, but the application as a whole, are we finding any vulnerabilities that we need to address and work on? And so that was a really nice start for us. And so while that was a good start, you heard me talk exclusively there about continuous integration, CI. We still didn't have continuous delivery. So all this great feedback and culturation is happening in the dev environment. But what about when you go to release to test and prod? We're still following the standard procedures that we had in place. And so we said, okay, well, how do we start taking things to that next level and really adopt CI/CD? And so again, following that sort of theoretical playbook, we brought in a different contractor, someone who's familiar with the tool, and he put together for us a proof of concept continuous delivery pipeline. And so that was a great way to us to see how this is possible within our environment. And so we took that proof of concept, we made some enhancements to it, and now we are preparing to go live with it in the future as a human in the loop delivery pipeline. So this delivery pipeline going to test environment and production environment is going to have some automated deployments and other automation built into it, but there's also checkpoints for managers to step in and sign off at various points in the pipeline. So that's a good step. And then now really the next phase of iteration, next opportunity to really make a difference is to optimize the flow of this pipeline. The software releases still require several levels of managers to approve them. And this is so we can pass our NIST security controls in regards to software ownership and having responsibility for releasing software and releasing software changes. How can we streamline that process? It's now very manual centric. And as I mentioned, the CD pipeline is going to have deployment automation in it. And we have some automated testing that's available. But we also have manual testing that's happened, that happens. And that is good for covering up what we like to call the unhappy path. So the automated testing usually covers our regression testing, especially as the application gets larger. It's very helpful to have that. But it often lags behind the progress of the application itself. And so we have manual testing to cover the gap. And this is another opportunity for us to improve the flow of value at Census, because if you look at the value stream map for Jaguar, one of the longest steps in the entire process is the manual testing step. And so how do you increase the speed? How do you improve flow without sacrificing quality? So another opportunity there for improvement. So really what we're trying to drive at here is, how do you leverage automation further? How do you have that appropriate division of labor and partnering with bots so that we're able to offload the mundane, repetitive toil that bots are so good at taking care of for you, and free up our staff to do more high-level thinking, creative problem solving, pattern matching, those things that humans are so good at. Really what we're trying to get at is, how can we get our software to come out looking like this, where the overall flow is happening? You can see that we want to go from value generated and translate that more quickly into value realized. getting that value into the hands of the end user so it's actually making a difference. And so how are we going to get to that point? Well, again, it's by following that same principle. So I welcome any and all feedback that you may have for census, for how to improve these processes while still adhering to NIST security controls. I feel like this is the right audience because we all are familiar with what does it take to do DevOps in a federal environment with the regulation that we experience. Maybe you've got experience with these processes at your agency and you'd like to share with us how you've innovated. Maybe you've got experience in leading from the middle. How do you drive that cultural change in your IT department without being actually at the top or being able to sort of dictate things from above? So happy to hear any experiences that people would like to share for me, but at the same time, I can open it up for questions from the audience.
Yeah, Graham, we will do that. And if you don't mind, I'd like to start. Speaking of like leading change in the middle, as you have done and your organization has really done, has that garnered any attention from broader census? And you talk about doing, the DevOps on actual metal. Has it started any conversations about, well, why aren't we in the cloud? Here's someone doing as much as they can within the constraints of on-prem. What about moving hybrid? What about getting some help to move to the cloud, et cetera? Curious about that.
Yep, those are all great questions. So yeah, I do think that the work we've been doing is starting to get some attention. We're starting to talk about, okay, sure, we see you doing CI/CD type work and DevOps and DevSecOps now is a popular term within your area. Is there any way to kind of abstract that and make it more enterprise based? So we're looking in that kind of area. Certainly cloud is a conversation that's happening. There are other areas of the census that are cloud based, and I think that that's sort of one of the strategic visions of the Census Bureau leadership is that they want to set up more cloud-based activities, and those right now are better suited for new projects. So those projects are, it's kind of easier to be cloud native, so to speak, than to be kind of full-on legacy and migrate. But certainly those conversations are there, and just trying to figure out what it takes for sort of a very large section of IT to go from completely metal to everything in the cloud, your database and your servers and all the infrastructure that you need to be cloud-based. And yeah, maybe that first step, as you mentioned, is to try some sort of hybrid approach.
Otherwise, let's open it up to the audience. Folks can just chime in. We've got, just under 20 folks on the call. We can manage this. Anyone have a question? Just ask. Or thought or even feedback. Graham is open to that as well.
Absolutely.
While we're waiting, Graham, here's some feedback. It's wonderful, all the change you all continue to push. I know sometimes there can be perfectionism around digital modernization because there's so much juxtaposition or contrasting with industry, which is often greenfielding, just starting from new, and they have a limited mission or user base, but census is such a big deal. Yeah, and it's literally waterfall. It's like I know some of the activities are occurring on a 5-year basis, but the 10-year cycle is such a huge thing, and so that must feel like you all are trying to do agile within this big tidal wave, that hits the organization that it has to accomplish every 10 years.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a big task that even in the middle of a decennial census, you begin planning for the next one. So even as early as 2020, you're already starting the beginning planning stage for 2030 because it's one of the largest peacetime operations that the government undertakes.
I know we have Dennis and Annette and probably a few others from IRS. And, speaking of that, the government cycle, and I got to feel that when I was at USGS, not so much at 18F, but USGS, where we were doing what we could to be very iterative within that waterfall of annual budgeting. And meanwhile, IRS has similar timelines, similar to census, right? But a bit tighter, shorter sprints. It's annual tax season, and then the prior administration asked a whole lot of the IRS to help with COVID response, and they did it. So yeah, also some rapid iteration occurring there. I don't know if anyone at IRS would like to respond. Oh yeah, and Ned's chiming in on chat.
Yeah, hi. This is Dennis. How are you? It was actually pretty amazing how the IRS responded during COVID, I thought, to get out the stimulus payments. A lot of the support functions, dealing on the IT side of the house were sped up. And I know our pipeline has greatly increased their number of projects that they put onto the pipeline over the last 2 years. You're right about the budget constraints that they do exist. I think there's a balancing act between the acquisition folks and the technical tool folks on what's the latest and greatest technical tool that we would like to purchase and bring in for usage. But where do you draw the limit on, we can't buy every single tool that's out there. So they have to make choices every 12 months, and put it into the budget request ahead of time. I think what happens is they run into, right now we have a lot of Ansible. So we just got some Ansible licenses. Where in the private sector, you may have been able to purchase those a little quicker. In the government, there's a lot of approvals that have to take place, and they want to make sure that it's the right tool being purchased. And then you're constrained to a 12-month commitment on the funds for your division. So all those are elements that the technical guys on the pipeline are dealing with. But I thought they did a great job at responding to the COVID stuff and the relief efforts over the last 2 years. So, thanks.
And
And
Graham,
sometimes, oh yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Brian.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say sometimes having that slower response allows for a more thoughtful response, because not having the tools can be as bad a situation as having too many.
Mhm.
Because if you have for instance, just communication, right, occurring in multiple platforms, there, the conversation is split everywhere, between Slack and email and Google Chat or whatever, right? There's so many different platforms. So at least having that conversations around licensing and why are we buying this? Why this one too? Or what else do we have in-house? Because sometimes people are trying to solve a problem with a branded solution rather than pulling back a bit. Whatever it is, and I'm just picking on communication platforms, but it can come down to anything. Anyway, so it's really interesting to hear about that too, Graham and Dennis. Thank you.
I was just going to say, Graham, what is the best way for people to continue to connect with you? Are you part of any external organizations, or do you utilize LinkedIn or any other network for those purposes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not on LinkedIn, and perhaps after this meeting, maybe that's not a good thing. But email is probably the best way. So graham.l.baggett@census.gov is the easiest way to connect with me.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
just,
we're
go ahead.
we're kind of done here. We're running out of time. Want to wrap it up, Kirsten? We doing
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you so much, Graham and Brian, for putting us in touch, and the rest of the ATARG DevOps community. And sorry if you can hear my dog and his squeaky toy in the background, but really enjoyed the presentation and looking forward to the next one. So thank you all.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yay,
And
bye.
I would invite folks, if you want to present, if you have something to share, just reach out. You can hit me up at brian.fox@omnifederal.com. And we'd love to get you on stage to share your success story, within federal government. And if you are a vendor that has tooling or capabilities that can help on an Agile or DevOps journey, we've got an opportunity to share that out too in our DevOps sync. So just reach out. We'll help get you on stage. I think we are scheduled out through like August now in some of these events.
Yep.
So it's good. It's good. But anyway, thank you all.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.